Good evening. We're back with another episode of the Lord of the Rings LCG Progression Series. Today's video is a card review of the Voice of Isengard expansion. So let's dive right in. The first hero is Eomer. Tactics hero, 10 threat, 1/3/2, 4 health. Response, okay, so he's not good on stats alone. After a character leaves play, Eomer gets +2 attack till the end of the round. So he's a good combat hero on turns when a character leaves play. So this is intending to, it does have Rohan synergy, but this is intending to encourage you to use jump blockers or perhaps the Rohan cards that leave play deliberately, such as the horse or the escort from Edoras. The Rittermark's finest is what I mean when I say the horse. He's going to be good attacker on turns when characters leave play in time to take advantage of his attack. He's weak on questing, as all tactics heroes are, seemingly. His threat's high. Without the Rohan synergy, I don't see this champion being good. I think it needs the Rohan synergy to be good. And as of right now, is the Rohan synergy good enough? There's possibilities. There's definite possibilities. I haven't seen it yet, but there's possibilities. I'll say that. So let's withhold judgment until we've seen the Rohan synergy. Similar to what I said, I think, about Boromir, withholding judgment until you see the Gondor synergy. Of course, that didn't pay off for quite some time. But I'm withholding judgment on Eomer for the time being. But he's not good enough on his stats or his ability alone. He needs the synergy. So, Grima. Lore hero, 9 threat, 2/1/2. So he's not good on his stats. 3 health. Lower the cost of the next card you play from your hand this round by 1. That card gains doomed 1. Okay, so it costs 1 threat to reduce the cost of a card by 1. Which you can do once per round. Well, the fact that you gain doomed 1 and you don't gain 1 threat instead is relevant, because there's some cards that benefit from the doomed keyword being played. Is there enough doomed synergy to make Grima good? If all he did was raise your threat by 1 to lower cost by 1, I think he would not be good enough. So 1 threat is worth about half of a resource when you control the manner in which you're raising your threat. So over time, this would be good if you had enough time. So he's understated. How long do you need him to gain you resources before he would be good at half a resource a turn? I would say either he needs 2 willpower or 3 more attack to be good. And what is that worth in terms of threat or resources? Well, you'd usually have to pay 2 willpower. You'd usually have to pay 2 costs to get 2 willpower on an ally. So let's say that 2 willpower is worth 2 cost. And his ability is worth half a resource. So you'd need 4 rounds before he's good with that ability. And you need to not mind taking 4 threat. Yeah, I'd say after 4 rounds he's okay. After 4 rounds. In decks where you can afford to take doomed 1. Now, sometimes early, depending on how you've built your deck, this is a big caveat with Grima. Depending on how you built your deck, you can't take 4 threat. Sometimes you've designed your deck so you're like 28 threat or something, and you got an enemy that comes in at 30. And if that's the case, you can not take 4 threat early, which means it's going to take longer than 4 rounds, because you have to wait until it's okay to raise your threat by that much to take advantage of his ability. So I think not only does he need 4 rounds, but he also needs a deck designed around him that's low threat. So that's a big caveat. But there could be a place for him. in decks where you design the deck around him and you need a lore hero, and with possible Rohan synergies. And I don't know if there's going to be Eisenguard synergies as well. So, I mean, thematically, I hate the idea of building a Grima deck, but there could be something here. Not easy to do, because his 9 threat doesn't exactly lend itself to a low threat deck. You'd have to build it around him, but it's not terrible if you did that. Could even be good if you were willing to build the deck around him. And that's possible to do in a way that makes sense for the quest that you're on. Could be good. So, kind of interesting heroes. Rohan synergy potentials. I think Grima might be better than Eomer, which is a bit depressing. I could be wrong about Grima. Maybe that ability isn't as good as I think it is, but I think if you build a deck around him with low threat, he could be good. Alrighty, allies. Saruman. 3 cost, 3/5/4. Whoa. Okay, 4 health, doomed 3. At the end of the round, discard Saruman from play. After Saruman enters play, choose a non-unique enemy or location in the staging area. While Saruman is in play, the chosen enemy or location is considered to be out of play. Wow, okay, that's a card. Am I missing something, or is this really good? So the doomed 3, if you're removing a card from the staging area, in a questing deck, a lot of times the doomed 3 is going to actually read like reduce your threat by 3 to increase your questing power by 3, and he contributes 3 to the quest. There are a lot of low threat decks where I think this would be good. Now, is he good in a deck which starts with threat over 30? Sometimes, and sometimes you're not going to be able to afford to play him. Is he good in a deck where you play a lot of doomed cards? The Doom 3 is expensive. You probably aren't going to want to play him 3 times in a game without some threat reduction, or without starting at a pretty low doom threat amount, like low 20s. If you started low 20s, you could afford to run 3 of Saruman. That effect is very strong in a questing deck. Very, very strong. He's not going to be effective on cards that are immune to player card effects, of course. But there's a lot of situations where this could clear location lock. This could help you avoid an enemy that is going to aggro this turn, and you're super close to finishing a critical point of the quest. And then in addition to just that ability, he's 3 questing for 3 cost and 5 attack for 3 cost. I would like to play this card. I think it's good, but I'd like to play it to be sure, because it could be the Doomed 3 is a bigger deal than I think it is. I don't think you'd be happy about seeing this super early in the game. He's more of a late game play. When the staging area is getting out of hand, this is when you play Saruman. Because he could really save you by helping you ignore one enemy, and then he could fight another one for you as well. At a cost of 3 threat. I think, like Grima, the deck has to be designed around him. With low threat, primarily. It doesn't have to be designed around him, but it has to be designed to be low threat. I don't think you're going to want to run him in a higher threat deck. Higher threat meaning starts over 30, because I think he'll be a dead card sitting in your hand a lot of the time. Because you'll play him once, then you'll draw him again and you won't be able to play him because your threat's too high, or you'll even draw him late game when he would be most useful, but you can't play him because you're already in the 40s for threat. So in the decks that you play that are around 20-ish, he might be worth a look. I think he's worth a look. I think he's good, but I'd like to mess around with him and see. I don't think he's good in combination with Hobbit Gandalf. But I think he's worth a look for sure, and I'll put him in some decks and see how it goes. Yeah. Very interesting card. I'm glad that card exists at any rate because it's a good trade-off, I think, for the power of the card versus the downside. It looks really OP at first glance, but I think the Doomed 3 is a bigger deal than I think, and I don't like to run just one of a card, because then you can't reliably draw it, and therefore you can't account for it in your strategizing. Yeah, I think this is good, but it'll need playtesting to confirm. Orthanc Guard. 2 costs, 102, Eisenguard. After you raise your threat from the Doomed keyword, ready Orthanc Guard. That makes no sense. So his primary selling point is his 2 shields. But he's only got 2 health, so you probably get maybe 1 attack. Let's say you take an attack from a... I mean, what if you're... So to get full value out of him, you take an attack for 2, he's exhausted, then you use a Doomed card and ready him and he can take another attack. I don't think he's that good if you're questing for 1 and then using him for his shields. I don't think this card is good. Even if you used him optimally, I don't think it's good. Eisenguard Messenger, 2 cost, 101, 2 health. After you raise your threat from the Doomed keyword, Eisenguard Messenger gets +1 questing until the end of the round. So he needs at least 1 threat up in order to gain... Yeah, he needs... This isn't a good card because there's lots of Rohan cards where you can get 2 willpower for 2 cost, or even 2 willpower for 1 cost. There's lots of cards in general. This is overcosted because it's off sphere. I don't like cards that are overcosted because they're off sphere. I'd rather just design a deck that's on sphere if I want to play that card. I think that's the case with Orthanc Guard too. It's like, it's off sphere. It's tactics is usually the combat. And so this card, if it had higher health, would be okay. But as it is, as it's designed, it doesn't really have a good use. At least not a good use that's not super risky. You could, I guess, use it to take on multiple 2 attack enemies, but how common is that situation? Maybe you could take on 2, 3 attack enemies, but that's so niche, so hard to pull off precisely. So niche. Yeah, neither of those cards are good. Those are both, Orthanc Guard and Eisenguard Messenger are both cards that are expensive because they're off sphere, and I don't like cards like that. Westfold Outrider, 2 cost, 021, unless there's insane Isengard synergies. 2 cost, 021, 2 health. Discard Westfold Outrider to choose an enemy not engaged with you, engage the chosen enemy. So Son of Arnor is 3 cost, 0202 for engaging the enemy, but it costs 1 more. You get the same attack, 1 less shield, and it doesn't discard to have the effect. Okay, so you play it in a deck where you might need to pull something out of the engagement or the staging area. In solo play, at least. In multiplayer, I mean, I don't like cards that are like this because it's like, okay, we'll just engage the enemy with the right player. This is like, okay, I messed up, and now I'm going to correct the mistake type of card in multiplayer. But in solo play, I guess the use would be similar to Son of Arnor, which has uses, but it's not common. Would you rather play Son of Arnor? I guess this gives you a tactics. They're probably roughly equivalent in terms of their usefulness. So I guess this just gives you a tactics option for that. It's a card that gives you greater options in the specific situation where Son of Arnor would be useful. So I don't hate it, but it's like it's got a purpose. It's just not a very widely used purpose. So far the most interesting cards for me are Saruman and Grima, which is a bit of a bummer thematically. I like Eomer. He's one of my favorite characters. I would like for his card to be better. But, yeah. Anyway. Westfold Horse Breeder. 1 cost, 1, 0, 0, 1 health. After Westfold Horse Breeder enters play, search the top 10 cards of your deck for a mount attachment and add it to your hand. Okay, that's got some uses. I think I would run 3 of that and 1 of Asphaloth in any deck I was running Tactics and Spirit. For sure. Yeah. You get 1 willpower for your 1 cost. You get a chump blocker and an effect that fetches some cards that are pretty good. We've already seen 2 mounts that are pretty good. Yeah, I like this card. I'd run it in a deck where I'm running mounts and spirit resources. And it has Rohan synergy as well. I like it. I like it for any deck where there's mounts. And spirit. Rohan Warhorse. Attached to a Tactics or Rohan hero. 1 cost. Restricted. After attached hero participates in an attack that destroys an enemy, exhaust Rohan Warhorse to ready attached hero. Okay, so you could stick this on like done here and attack 2 enemies in the staging area if he's buffed up. I don't think you get a lot of use out of this unless you designed a deck around it. It's not a card you just, like you've built a good deck and you add this to that deck and now the deck is better. Because this situation of participating in an attack that destroys an enemy where you then need to destroy another enemy doesn't happen enough in solo play. So, in specific decks that like perhaps are designed to attack the staging area or that are facing a lot of small enemies, this might be worth including. But yeah, it's a kind of card that sounds better in theory than it plays, unfortunately. So, yeah. It sounds good. I like the theming. I like the idea of like making a lot of attacks against staging area enemies. It's hard to pull off in a way that is powerful and makes sense. Silver Lamp. 2 cost, attached to a spirit hero. While attached hero is ready, shadow cards dealt to enemies engaged with you are dealt face up. Shadow card effects are still resolved when resolving enemy attacks. Well, that knowledge does have some value. But the cost is high, and I'm not talking about the 2 resources, but having to keep an attached hero ready. Probably doesn't make sense to run this card in most situations because of that, because you don't play too many heroes that you don't have a use for. So you'd probably have to run this with like Unexpected Courage, and then you're talking about a 2-card combination in addition to the hero, and that it's going to be slow and unreliable. But it's an interesting card. It's possible that the value of knowing the shadow effect is higher than I think. But a lot of the time the nastiest shadow effects aren't really mitigated by choosing the target. It's like attack again and you're like, well, whoever I choose to take this shadow effect, it's not going to be good. So, yeah, this interesting card, but the cost is high, which is that you have to have an attached hero ready. I think if you didn't have to do that, the cost would probably be too low, to be honest. It would need to cost like 4 resources. Keys of Orthanc. 1 cost attached to a hero after you raise your threat from the doomed keyword. Exhaust Keys of Orthanc to add 1 resource to attached hero's resource pool. Alright, so if you do it once, it pays for itself. If you do it again, well, if you put this out on Grima, you could get -2 per turn. That would make it equivalent to Steward of Gondor, I guess, but at the cost of 2 threat per turn. 2 separate procs of the Doomed keyword. I guess it depends on how strong the Doomed synergy is. So far I haven't seen it. Just Orthanguard and Eisenguard Messenger. But the Doomed cards are going to add up if you play a lot of them. You'd really need a deck designed around it. Would you run this in a Grima deck with low threat to start? I don't know if you would without any other Doomed synergy. I think you would need some other Doomed synergy. Otherwise I don't know. Grima with Keys of Orthanc. Needs playtesting, let's say. It would not be good without a deck designed around it. With a deck designed around it, does that deck exist? That would be good. Lore likes to generate cards. That's good. And then having resources to pay for them could be quite good. There's probably a deck out there where this makes sense. Could even be good. Legacy of Numenor, 0 cost, Doomed 4, add 1 resource to each hero's resource pool. That Doomed 4 is a lot for an additional 3 resources. I value 1 threat at half a resource, so this is add 3 to lose 2, basically. With the caveat being, threat could be cheaper in a deck designed specifically for it. But at its face, it's a fine card, but not a good one. With a deck designed around it, it could be an accelerator early. But 4 threat is a lot early. And this isn't going to be good late, I don't think. So it's not good in the situation where it would be good, which is early game. That is terribly worded, but it's like not good in the situation it's designed for. It's good in a situation where it's not designed for. Hard to make that work in a way that's good, I think. There's better options for having this effect without the downside. I'm reminded of that card where you gain 3 resources if you have 2 already or something like that. And it's Leadership, which already has a bunch of ways to generate resources. Deep Knowledge, 0 cost, Doomed 2. Each player draws 2 cards. Okay, now we're talking. That's something. 2 cost for 2 cards for 0 resources. That's a card that's going to see some play. It's not like a so powerful it unlocks new strategies card, but that'll see some play. It's a fine addition to the Lore's collection of card draw effects. Especially if the Doom synergy is any good. The Wizard's Voice, 0 cost, Doomed 3. Each player chooses 1 enemy engaged with him until the end of the phase. Each chosen enemy cannot attack the player that chose it. So it's a 0 cost feint for 3 threat. That's actually more expensive than feint in solo play. In multiplayer, it's good. It's only good in multiplayer. It's worse than feint in solo. And would you ever play both? There might be some situations where you'd want to run feint and the Wizard's Voice. There might be, but it is worse than feint, and so if you're only going to run one or the other, you'd run feint in solo play. In multiplayer, though, it's good. It's better than feint in multiplayer. Power of Orthanc. 0 cost, Doom 2. Each player may choose and discard a condition attachment from play. That's straight up good against any encounter deck that has nasty conditions, and there's a lot of them. Almost all of the conditions that attach to your heroes, it's worth 2 threat to get rid of. Almost every single one. Almost without exception. Good card. I'd run it anytime there's an encounter deck with nasty conditions. Because some of them are just flat out game ending. The conditions that attach to you. The Seeing Stone, 0 cost, doomed 1. Search your deck for a card with the doomed keyword and add it to your hand. Shuffle your deck. Okay, so we haven't seen any doomed synergy worth playing. The only cards I see are Orthanc-Guard and Eisenguard Messenger, and those aren't synergistic enough to justify playing the doomed keyword on its own. So what we're left with is individual effects at the moment. We'll see what adventure packs add, but at the moment, searching your deck for a card with the doomed keyword, well, you're not searching the top 5 or the top 10 cards, so that's something. You could play Saruman and search for him if you really needed him, I suppose. Probably wouldn't do that, though. What about like Saruman and Power of Orthanc, and then you run the Seeing Stone, and whichever one you need more is the one you grab? I could see that. I could even see grabbing the Wizard's Voice if you really needed the Feint effect. Possibly even Deep Knowledge. I like this card a bit. Searching for your deck for a specific card is a luck reducer, and that I like a lot. I really like that a lot. I think it's probably worth 1 threat. In any situation where you're running a deck where you know there's going to be situations where you're really going to want one of the doomed cards. Yeah, this could be good. This could be good. I don't know that it's a must include, because there's no like combination of doomed cards equivalent to like Elrond Villia or something, or a Glorfindel Asphaloth, where it's like, okay, I get this and then I win. So it's not like a must include power card, but it could be a helpful contributor in some situations as a luck reducer to increase the consistency of your deck for a cost of 1 threat and the inclusion of the card. And depending on which doomed cards you're playing, it could really make a difference when you top deck it. So I like the card. Now, what do I think of the expansion overall? Well, I like to try out Greenman. I like to try out Saruman. That's about all I can say about it right now. Nothing leaps off the page like it did with Glorfindel or Elrond Villia. But I think it's worth a look. It's worth trying. That's about the best I can say about it. I like it a little bit better than Heirs of Numenor. Yeah, a little bit better. Westfold Horsebreeder, I'll see some play. Like to mess around with Saruman, maybe even Grima. At some point. Yep. That's about all I could say about it. It's not a must buy. It's interesting. Interesting, but not a must buy. Similar to Heirs of Numenor probably, but maybe a little bit better. Heirs of Numenor I wouldn't say really got good until the last adventure pack. We'll see what happens in this cycle. But as of right now, interesting but not a must buy. Thanks for watching.